Ever thought that the idea of playing fantasy football and getting involved would be fun, but you were too intimidated to try? Me too. Well, here's how to talk shop and take home a win. Athletic ability or football knowledge is not required. This is Sports Curious, presented by Last Night's Game. I'm your host, Amy Butchon-Siegfried. Thanks for joining us this week. We're excited to talk about one of the hottest sports, or quote-unquote sports, around, especially right now with football season starting, fantasy football. So being a fantasy football pro doesn't really have to be a fantasy at all. So much of it is luck and knowing a few key strategies. There is nothing wrong with embracing the way you want to pick your team and enjoying the game. It's that simple. So let's dive right into 5 tips to avoiding the intimidation that is fantasy football. Now, before we dive into this first tip, I have to admit, I am not the best fantasy football player. In fact, I find it quite intimidating myself. I also should say that I have won my league before, but that was completely dumb luck. Some big players were injured that season, and some other players that I happened to have did really well. So remember that when picking your team, it's a lot like picking a March Madness bracket. You need to have a core great group, but really, truly, a lot of it is luck, and it's anybody's guess who will take home the win. So let's dive into our first point. The sport of fantasy football was originally developed in 1962, but modern fantasy football started in 1999 when Yahoo offered an online league. Now players can create teams using ESPN or other sports apps and make some dough with online betting sites like DraftKings, although sports betting sites like DraftKings are still illegal in a few states, so make sure to check yours. It is certainly a male-dominated sport, with men making up over 80% of the 60 million participants. But don't look now, because women are whipping up teams of their own. Just because some men want to debate the 1982 Super Bowl champions doesn't mean that's required to enjoy a fantasy football league. Women have to remember their mother-in-law's birthday and the neighbor's cat's names, so there is no need to use those brain cells with useless football factoids. There are whole leagues and even businesses dedicated to helping female football fans join in on the fun. Fantasy football is usually fun, but some leagues are not for the faint of heart. Some leagues take it very seriously, and there is a punishment for coming in last. In my league, we reward the last person, so there's that. Penalties have included spending 24 hours at a Waffle House. Seriously, that happened last year. Buying drinks for the entire next football season, doing a stand-up routine at a local open mic night, or waxing of the nether regions. Picking a team name is one of the best things about fantasy football, but remember, no one is intimidated by the unicorn underdogs. Luckily for you, there are massive lists of suggested names out there for inspiration. Some of my favorites: Blitzkrieg, Sax in the City, Game of Thrones, Drinkers with a Kicking Problem, Teddy Roosevelt, and a Real Housewife who fantasizes. Our biggest pointer for first-time fantasy football players is don't forget to set your lineups once a week. You have up until your first player's game starts to adjust. Remember that during the NFL season, some teams play on Thursday night. With the average person spending $556 on fees, materials, and prizes, you'll want to put your best foot ball forward. Thanks for joining us this week. We hope you learned something really interesting and it made your fantasy football dreams a little less intimidating. But for questions like who is the commish, why do I care about bye weeks, and what's the recipe for success, make sure you head on over to our website at lastnightsgame.com and check out our Fantasy Football 101 for all of the answers to your questions. If you have a question that is not there, send me a note at amy@lastnightsgame.com. I would love to find the answer for you and help you kick butt on your fantasy football team. We have just what you need to get your football season started off right. Maybe something special to wear a tailgate, or that fantasy football draft, or maybe just Sunday brunch. Head on over to our website at lastnightsgame.com and check out our merch store. My favorite shirt that I wear all the time is the Winebacker shirt. Like linebacker, get it? I've worn it a lot lately and I've had a ton of compliments. My son also loves to sport the Do Epic shirt, And that one gets a lot of laughs, and it's perfect for a 2-year-old, right? Make sure to use promo code SportsCurious for your listener discount. That's it for this week. We look forward to seeing you here next week for another episode of Sports Curious. Make sure to stay tuned in because it's football season. It's what everyone's talking about, and we will have you covered so you have everything you need to know, and there is no FOMO happening with this stick kickoff to the season. With that, stay safe, friends. Wash your hands.